with that, I will do the roll call. Maggie Amato Tejas,
Present.
Mindy Bernstein,
Here.
Vicky Cusino. I do not see Vicky. Serena Wadake. Don't see Serena either. Lori Mazurbo.
Present.
Robert Ojeda. I see Robert, but maybe since he's driving, we'll give him a break for the. Tisha Tallman. I know Tisha is not joining today. Jim Toffel.
Present.
Ray Winch.
Present.
Kenny Wong.
Present.
Alan Solat. I know that he is also not joining today. And Jay Young, that is me. Ex officio members, Ann Janeka.
Here. Sorry, can't get off mute.
Corin Manning. Marcos Ismail.
Here.
And Michael Edmonds. With that, I would like to welcome Robert Ojeda, new member on the commission. Robert is the new president and CEO of Pima Council on Aging. And again, I know Robert is driving at the moment, but Robert, if you are available to hop on real quick and introduce yourself and say, hey, that would be great. If not, if you remain on mute, I will know to move on. All right, we will let Robert introduce himself at a different time when he is in a safe spot to speak. With that, I would like to move on and see if there are any changes or updates that need to be made to the July meeting minutes. And if there are not, I would entertain a motion to approve the July minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Jim. Can I get a second?
I'll second. This is Lori.
Thanks, Lori. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, and with that, the July meeting minutes are approved. Next, just a quick review of the agenda. So we'll have the call to the audience, and then basically, I think what we're going to be doing this meeting is just touching base on where we are in our subcommittees for the most part, in terms of coming up with our various plans to address homelessness. We have some time to follow up on any materials that we may need to deal with the homelessness issue that we are currently addressing. Again, we might not need a ton of time for that. We also have the report outs from our subcommittees. We have a report about the Housing Trust Fund task force, and then a brief discussion on Keith Bentley's presentation regarding homelessness that was shared with everyone. We'll do a check-in about the meeting next month, which is in person, where Southwest Decision Resources will be facilitating and helping us to kind of get to the next phase of our the work we're doing in our subcommittees and coming up with our recommendations. Then just the usual city and county updates and next steps. So, you know, we may not need a ton of time for this meeting. I always say that, and it ends up, you know, hitting 6 o'clock. So we'll see. But with that, I will move on to the call to the audience. The call to the audience is limited to 3 minutes per speaker and a total of 10 minutes. All speakers must share their name to be recorded in the meeting minutes. And please remember, the call to the audience may not result in discussion with members of CEHD, No legal action may take place during the call to the audience, and speakers may not be disruptive. CEHD members may only respond to criticism and request that items be placed on a future agenda for discussion. And finally, members of the audience may still participate on agenda items as per the bylaws of CEHD. And with that, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak?
No hands are up yet, Jay.
Okay, going once, going twice. Okay. Moving on, with the commission's permission, I would actually like to switch the next two items around. I'd like to do the report outs from the subcommittees first, just to kind of see where we are and the progress we've made. And then I think from there, it might be a little bit easier to think about any materials that or other information that we feel like we might need in order to complete the work in our various subcommittees. Without objection, I will do that. Is that okay with folks?
Yes, with me.
All right, Mindy says it's fine, so that's what we're going with. And with that, let's do the report outs from the subcommittees. So I will start Equitable Housing Strategies Subcommittee. We did not meet the last time we had a meeting scheduled. We were not able to meet quorum. But basically where we are is, again, you know, we keep harping on Keith Bentley's presentation, but, you know, in terms of the work that we're doing in our subcommittee, Keith really lays out recommendations that we think are important and are backed up with the research that he and his team have been doing. So we are communicating amongst ourselves between now and our next meeting, and we're really looking at just adopting his recommendations from his research. We have a couple of other things kind of floating around as well that we may include, but you know, that's kind of where we're going. So I think we're really on track, probably this month, between this month and the next month, to, you know, have a pretty good working draft of recommendations for homelessness prevention. Does anyone else from the Equitable Housing Strategies Subcommittee have anything to add to that? Okay. With that, I will move to affordable housing, which is you, Jim. Take it away.
Thanks. So we had a good meeting this last month, and we actually finished a draft of the action plan template. So we came up with, I don't know if do you want me to go through kind of how we filled it out, or
Why not?
okay. Can I share my screen? It'd be easier to do it when I share my screen.
Yeah, I'll give you that permission, Jim. You should be able to now.
Okay. Here we go. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this was the action plan, I think, that we were all kind of tasked with completing. So the objectives that we came up with were first objective is to reduce the incidence of people who are entering homelessness, create living situations for people who are experiencing homelessness, who have mental illnesses and substance abuse conditions. So we said this is the housing first model, but many programs just provide for housing. It's imperative that support services are also provided and available. Reduce the financial burden on owners who rent to people with mental or known behavioral issues. Update the zoning to allow for the acquisition of existing buildings and the construction of new buildings for sheltering the homeless, and identify additional sources to boost the supply. So just as a point of reference, we put the graphic that shows the kind of all the different stages of the housing spectrum. So our desired outcomes, we have 4 desired outcomes. The first was to increase funding for homelessness prevention assistance with required services. Second was to create a new brand of communal communities with private quarters that focus specifically on recovering from mental illness and substance abuse for no less than 30 and up to 150 days of temporary housing with treatment. To remove barriers to allow available sources to assist individuals with mental illness and other severe issues. And then zoning changes that will facilitate the production of additional shelter facilities. Do you guys understand that zoning issue? The zoning issue is basically there's most shelter facilities fall under institutional zoning, and there's only a handful of locations in the city right now that are zoned properly for emergency shelters. So it's practically speaking, the way the zoning code is right now, it's next to impossible to build additional shelter facilities. So, so the tasks that we said, you know, and timelines of what we thought needed to be done. The first task was to increase the number of beds in emergency shelters, which should be based off of our point in time count. We want to review the housing needs assessment that's currently being paid for by Eco Northwest, or is being developed by Eco Northwest, is being paid for by the city of Tucson and Pima County. So again, we're talking about the zoning needs to potentially come up with a map showing available locations, and then ideally task development services with adjusting the zoning codes to facilitate more available locations. This was something that we've all talked about before, which is the TPCH centralized database for coordinating entry to track homelessness and services. And then the last item, which we thought would be done by the city manager, I'm not sure that's the right person, was to identify a permanent annual source to fund the city of Tucson's housing trust fund. Last thing was to establish a PR campaign to educate the public on homelessness issues. So information needs, we need the Eco Northwest housing supply study, and when that's ready, the point in time count. We'd like to see the final proposal for Pima County. So they've committed, I think it was, I've heard 250 million or 300 million over the next 10 years to go towards affordable housing. So we'd like to understand the sources and uses of those funds. And then current standards versus best practices for zoning requirements. So the obstacles that we see are the city of Tucson's funding gap. You know, we spent a lot of time talking about about this, and the overwhelming complexity of this problem really does make it difficult to know where to start. It makes it difficult to address it comprehensively and to bring together all the necessary resources, which leads, I think, to all of us feeling to the point where we almost become indifferent to the issue instead of taking action. So I think that's an obstacle that, you know, that I think we're all feeling. You know, one of the obstacles is how do you help people who don't want help? So there's a lot of people on the street who don't want to go into a shelter. They don't want those services. And then availability of existing sites. So opportunities, I think Pima County is showing a lot of leadership right now in their funding commitments to affordable housing. And the corridor overlay, which was recently passed, received a lot of community support, and that may carry over to relaxing other zoning codes. So that's kind of what we came up with so far.
Thanks, Jim. Ray, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks for putting this together, Jim. I think my one question about that statement around how do we help people who don't want to be helped, who don't want to go into a shelter? I And I think that those are two different things. Of saying that someone doesn't want to go into a congregate shelter for me doesn't mean that person doesn't want to help. It means that that solution isn't going to work for that person. So it's maybe like a different way of framing that, of like, how do we support people who our services aren't going to work for?
Okay. Well, there
Oh,
are
sorry.
people. I mean, I was the one that kind of came up with that question, and that was based off of the survey that we did with the point in time count. And I interviewed probably 18 people. And probably, when we asked the question, would you like somebody to reach out to you to offer help? Maybe a third of them said no. And then of the 2/3 who said yes, several of them didn't have any way to be contacted. So they didn't have a cell phone. There was no easy way for somebody to reach out to them. And so that's kind of been a nagging question in the back of my head is, if somebody wants to live on the street and they don't want help, what should the city's position be on that?
Mindy, you have a question?
I do. I have two comments. Jim, the number of days that you listed for people to stay in emergency shelter or transitional shelter time is very short. It will, again, that just contributes to more of the Band-Aid that is perpetuating our the system of people being homeless. Coming in after being homeless for any amount of time, depending on depending on the individual and the situation and the cause. If it's a family who just lost their apartment and they're intact and able to navigate, that might be just the perfect amount of time. Most of the individuals that I think that we're talking about are in, and this will go into the second piece, is our chronically homeless individuals who have substance use disorders and serious mental illnesses, who had at one point in time received services from the state, including housing, case management, medication, recovery supports, peer support specialists, a whole variety of services that not only encourage but enhance their ability to stay well and to recover. We have a revolving door issue happening here and nationally. An unpopular, I am very much a consumer choice person, that we have shown enough data that people do quickly get better in housing first. We also in Arizona have we're one of the few states that has a Title 36 commitment law, where it's danger to self, danger to other, or if a person has a known or suspectedly known history of mental illness, that they can be petitioned involuntarily into the hospital, stabilized, and brought into the care management system, which is non-existent, right? Is hardly existent right now. So we've got multiple. So in answer to what do we do with people who don't want help? I can tell you probably all of them have a history of serious mental illness, or probably psychotic and unaware of the reality of being without shelter, which is a common issue with psychotic disorders. Or so it's a catch-22. There's no money in the system to provide the services to keep them well, to help people stay well. No long-term housing, because it takes years for some people to recover. And especially with substance abuse, like with meth and probably all of the new ones, it takes 18 months for the brain to heal from an addiction.
Right.
So
So that the discussion around that 30 to 150 days that you're
Yeah.
referring to here. So right now, if somebody overdoses, and they take them in, they treat them, they cannot legally hold them for more than 48 hours.
correct.
And so it would be nice to have a place where they can go, where they can detox, because it takes time for them to get to a point where they can make a decision when they're not coming off of whatever addiction. And that was the duration based on Maggie and Mary Ann's experiences dealing with people of how long it takes before somebody can make a clear decision on what's kind of in their best interest long term. So I agree with you. People need to have options for years. But this is very specialized, focused recovery for primarily substance abuse issues to kind of get them through that first rough patch before they could find something that's, maybe a little bit less intensive or more stable. That makes sense?
It does.
Jim, if I could add something, I want to uplift Ray's comment. There's very complicated reasons why people will tell someone who's doing a survey on the street why they don't want shelter in that moment. And I just think we need to be careful with how we communicate that, because I think it's kind of a misnomer. People can't bring their pets. They can't have their spouses or their partners, or if their kids are older, they can't always stay in a shelter with their parents. There's lots of reasons why people say no, including mental health issues and substance abuse issues. But that's why street outreach is so important, because it creates relationships. You're just a stranger coming up on one day in January asking, tell me about your whole life. Tell me why you're on the street. It's probably unlikely that people are going to be like, wow, you're just the guy I was looking for,
Yeah.
or woman I'm looking for, take me to housing. So I just want to be careful with that, because I think that I hear that narrative a lot in the news and different things. And I don't really truly believe people want to be homeless. I think there's reasons why they mistrust the system, bad experiences they've had, reasons why shelter doesn't work for everybody, especially if you're LGBTQ. All kinds of things. So I just want to uplift what Ray said.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Jim? One of the things I want to note, and again, we're kind of crossing over into another agenda item, but also, as I mentioned, our subcommittee is really centering the recommendations that are found in Keith Bentley's presentation. And I'm just noticing, Jim, that a lot of the things that y'all are recommending are also on essentially on Keith's or at least what he's calling early recommendations. The very first one being what you mentioned, no real coordinated homeless prevention system, right? Needing to get everybody on the same page so that, everybody kind of knows what's going on. The next one is, it's difficult for people to access accurate information about homelessness prevention resources, which isn't exactly what Lori was talking about, but I think that can play a role as well. And then, if people do get the correct information, the services and supports are under resourced. That obviously plays a big role. Another thing that again, Jim, I think you were talking about, it's not exactly the same, but it's I think there's some similarity of people entering homelessness from institutions, whether that's like a hospital or jail or treatment center or other housing programs. Again, the underfunding relative to the need. And then, this really speaks to, I think, what Lori was saying as well, and Mindy as well. But, we need a diverse number of options depending on, where people are at. So kind of meeting people where they are is instead of a one size fits all. And then, again, just the lack of affordable housing, that kind of meta structure playing a huge role in homelessness. So anyway, just based on kind of what you were saying and where I think we're going, it seems like there's a lot of crossover. So I don't know, it occurs to me that, again, thinking about our in-person meeting next month, maybe one of the things that we can have Southwest Decision Resources help us in terms of facilitation is maybe, looking at how our recommendations are crossing over, and maybe that, what we're kind of moving towards is, one body of recommendations as opposed to, various recommendations from our subcommittees. But anyway, I just was, as you were going through that and people were making comments, it just struck me how similar a lot of the recommendations that y'all are getting to are pretty similar to what we're looking at in equitable housing strategies. So thought that was interesting and wanted to share. Any other thoughts or comments, Jim? Anything else from your subcommittee, or anybody else have comments or questions?
No, I mean, my assumption was that we were going to try to aggregate kind of this from all the groups to come up with
Right.
one from the commission as a whole.
Right.
So this is one data point from 3 of 3.
Right. And so maybe just kind of the idea of getting together with Southwest Decision Resources next month, that's kind of what we can put on the table, is like, how do we get to the unified recommendations, I think, that we're looking for.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts before we move on?
No,
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Mindy.
thank you for the hard work, Jim. And where do I get that form?
I thought wasn't it emailed out to everybody? I can email you mine. I'll share mine with you.
Could you please? Thank you.
Jay, just backing us up for a second, looks like Robert is in a position to say hi if you so would like.
Robert, welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself.
My apologies. I was having some issues with my phone as I was driving, so probably a good idea not to speak then. No, it's good to be here. I'm looking forward to working with you all. Robert Ojeda. I'm the CEO of Pima Council on Aging. Worked for years at the food bank here, and then was working with Feeding America, and then most recently I was the CEO of the food bank in Seattle before coming back to Tucson. So looking forward to reconnecting with some of you and meeting those who I don't know, and hopefully contributing to the commission as well. It's good to be here.
Thanks, Robert. We are so glad to have you back in Tucson and on the commission. And I think we got to get you on a subcommittee. I don't remember if we've gotten you on one yet, but we can chat about that soon. But happy to have you. And yeah, so from here, I know talking about subcommittee report outs, I know that Housing First, Tish's subcommittee, is still having trouble meeting, and we got together and talked about, kind of how to move forward with getting some recommendations. So I know she's working on that. We may end up discussing that a little bit more next month as well. I think the other thing that came up in talking with Tisha is, potentially, scrapping that subcommittee just because it's been so hard to meet. So anyway, I don't really have anything on that, at this point, but just kind of something for everyone to think about. And, I think also, as we, coalesce around our recommendations regarding homelessness, we can also start to think about, what we want to tackle after that, because it seems like we're getting pretty close to some recommendations. Obviously, we'll have some support next month from Southwest Decision Resources, and hopefully have a pretty good roadmap for, finalizing some recommendations and getting that to mayor and council. So, we're in August, next month, we're meeting in September. Maybe by October or November, we can have some recommendations finalized and then think about what we want to tackle next. I know that, one of the things that we've been doing is we have obviously not had nearly as many other topics to deal with, fewer presentations and whatnot. So, I don't know if we maybe want to get back to a more, generally looking at housing issues, or if we want to, look at tackling another specific issue. Again, this is not necessarily related to our report outs, but just kind of want to put that on the table. The Housing Trust Fund task force as well is on this part of the agenda, but there's also a chunk of time set aside for that a little farther down the agenda as well. So with that, if there's no other report outs, no other questions or comments, yeah, see, Ray?
Oh, I just saw the mobile home task force was on the agenda too. I could give a update
Oh,
there.
yes. Yes, go ahead, Ray. Sorry, I forgot about that.
So mobile home task force has continued our monthly meetings. We still meet on the fourth Thursday of the month from 1 to 3. Our last meeting, we focused on the repair programs that are available. So a number of the groups in town present. So PCOA presented, Pima County Home Repair Program, Chirpa, and this following month on August 28th, we'll be focusing on the accountability and enforcement of the Mobile Home Park Landlord Tenant Act, with a specific lens towards the master meter utility charge enforcement, as well as reliability of service enforcement as well. So we met this morning with, I'm not sure if Andrew is on here, can't see everyone here. Andrew helped us to connect with folks in Denver, who in 2019 passed a law where Colorado as a state now has a department that's solely dedicated to mobile home park landlord tenant enforcement and a registry. They'll be sharing, someone who did her master's thesis on master meters around utility charges for mobile home parks in Pima County. Will be sharing some of her research on the link between master meter rates in neighborhoods and eviction rates, and just the astronomical increase in the percentage of evictions that happen when there's that increase in master meter. So I think it'll be a really interesting meeting, and really hoping to be moving forward with some of these steps. We're have for a while seen where some of the issues are, and really trying to look at, okay, we know, for example, that the Corporation Commission doesn't oversee this. And it's what are the barriers? What would it look like? We know the Department of Housing hasn't been enforcing this. What could it look like to get there? So even if you're not a member of the group or been coming regularly, you are invited. We do send the invitations to everyone on CEHD. It'll be August 28th, and it'll be on Zoom. The September one will be in person, but we'll be on Zoom for one more month. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Any questions or comments for Ray? All right. So moving on to the next agenda item, which was the agenda item before this originally. We've got a little bit of time to discuss follow-up on education materials for the commission related to homelessness. So, this was a spot on the agenda where we could highlight any information that we think we're missing, either as a full commission as we're dealing with homelessness prevention, or other information that would be useful for us as we're deliberating in our various subcommittees. So I can't think of anything that we're really missing in our subcommittee. Maybe some of the other of our subcommittee members think otherwise, but Is there anything that y'all feel like we need more information about, presentations or, information that HCD or, other departments could give us that would help us in moving forward with coming up with recommendations? Go ahead, Kenny.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I think we had this on the calendar for August with the subcommittee, but still curious to learn a little bit more about the community safety, health, and wellness, and the kind of outreach that they're doing. And I know there's some conversation about rescheduling our subcommittee meeting. I
Yeah.
thought we had also decided to move those to Thursday afternoons. So yeah, two parts. Cashew, figuring that out, the schedule for when that presentation will happen. And still curious about how the Housing Central Command approach. I think it came up in Keith's presentation as well, the incident command. I think it's all a little fuzzy in my mind. So if there are lessons from that or what's moved since that pilot, I'd be curious to find out more.
Kenny, do you think it would be useful to have somebody present on the lessons from the Housing Central Command? Because I don't know who could do that. Is there somebody from HCD or go ahead? Andy.
Yeah. Kat, I don't know if you're in a position to come off mute, but we can certainly coordinate someone coming to present on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to present. I'm happy to answer questions if you have time now, but yeah, happy to chat about all that stuff if that's helpful.
Do y'all want to have an impromptu session about that right now? I think we probably got some time in the agenda, and it seems like it would probably fit the agenda. Could we do that, or do you guys want to do it at a future meeting? I was kind of putting you on the spot, Kat, I think.
No, it's all right. I'm fine with it if you guys want to use your meeting time that way.
Does that interfere with the posting of it as an agenda item 24 hours prior to a meeting?
Yeah, I think the agenda item is general enough. It is certainly educational materials related to homelessness.
Yeah.
So I would say if it's pretty high level, I'm comfortable with it.
I'd take that to court. Yeah, so Kat, if you're ready, willing, and able, if you could give us a little bit of information about what Kenny was asking, and maybe if folks have questions, that would be great. So I'll turn it over to you, Kat.
Sure, yeah. So I don't know how much you guys know about the Housing Central Command Initiative, also called the Tucson Unsheltered Initiative. So I'll give kind of a high-level overview from the beginning. So there was some special funding that was awarded through the COC program that our community received back in 2023. I believe, or at least competed for. Maybe we received it in 2024. I think we're about a year and a half into the funding. But that funding is going to community bridges as well as OPCS, as well as the city of Tucson. So essentially what that funding is for is to create strategies to move folks directly from encampments to housing. And so that's what that team has been focused on. They were using the encampment protocol dashboard that the city has that shows all of the encampments that are reported to the city. They're focused on tier 2 reports, which is where people are living there, but there wasn't like nefarious activity that marked it for immediate removal. So they would intervene with an encampment and work to get everybody housed directly from that. The funding from the special NOFO was to provide that wraparound services as well as the actual rental subsidies. And so they would intervene with an encampment, kind of do an assessment on everyone and then work to get them directly into housing. This required a lot of work up front. because folks living in encampments often have things like warrants that need to be quashed. They don't have their birth certificates or IDs and documents like that that are needed to get housing. So it's working with them to get document ready and then showing them units and having them find a place to live. So a big part of this process was breaking down and rebuilding our internal processes for how we house folks. I wasn't here for that part of it, but I know there was a lot of work done to make our system more nimble and more reactive and be able to house people more quickly. So that was a big part of it. And so from this effort's ongoing. So currently they are working throughout the summer at 100 Acre. So you might have heard about the 100 Acre initiative that's happening as they try and house people from there so that we can remove as many people as possible before construction. But that's kind of a shared goal, but also our main goal is to house as many people as possible. So they've been working out there for the last month for that effort because there's so many people and also because it's not the most safe encampment per se. They've had a lot of people going out there. So they were going out there every day, Monday through Thursday with a lot of different partners to just have a lot of traffic, a lot of activity. They're providing healthcare, they're providing housing assessments, documentation, all the things that these folks will need to be able to be housing ready. And so they're ready to start housing some folks. They're doing intakes to OPCS. A lot of these individuals will be housed over at the new Amazon property that's about ready for folks to move in. So we got to do a little tour there this week. But yeah, so that work is ongoing. And so a lot of what they've done to kind of break down the systems and rebuild them, that has been implemented now across our system in various ways. So one of the ways that we did this is changing our entire coordinated entry system. So coordinated entry is how we assess people and prioritize them and then match them into housing projects. And kind of based on what we learned through HCC, we've gone from a direct referral process where an agency has a vacancy in their housing project, they request a referral, the next prioritized person on the list goes to them, they have to find that person. We've changed from that system to a batch matching system where there's a list of people that are prioritized for housing. And when an agency has an opening, they can take any of those people directly into their program. So the idea is that they might already have somebody on that list that is living in their shelter or is interacting with their outreach team, and they might know where to find somebody already. And so the idea is they can find that person right away and get them in to fill that bed instead of having these weeks and weeks at a time where they're looking for this specific referred person. And so it's still a prioritization process, but it's designed to be a bit more flexible and get people into housing more quickly. So that's just one example of how we've taken lessons learned from HCC and kind of implemented them across the system. Another is that we're working on coordinated outreach. So agencies all going out together to do outreach for folks that are on this batch list rather than one agency sending out an outreach person to look for their one person. Now they're kind of interacting more. They're going out in more multidisciplinary teams to support the batch list rather than just their own agency's person. So those are some of the ways that those lessons learned are kind of being implemented in our system. We're still learning. The importance of stabilization has come up for us because these folks are challenging to house. A lot of them have not been in housing for years, potentially, if they're living in an encampment, and they're not used to that. So we've learned a lot about what it takes to keep somebody housed once they get a house. It's not as simple as here's this shiny new apartment, how wonderful, move on in and live your life. It can make people feel really disconnected, and that belonging piece is really important. And there's a lot of mutual aid and community that is developed within an encampment and some level of trust with the people that you're living there with, even if there are abusive things going on, there's some level of trust for all those folks living there. And so to take people out of that community into an isolated apartment is a challenge. They feel cut off from nature, they feel cut off from each other. So we are looking into more innovative options like shared housing options to move people together, or like at the Amazon where a lot of people will be living there potentially from the same encampment. To kind of keep that community. We also have a stabilization team that includes people from our lived experience council that is working to provide additional stabilization for folks after they've moved in. They're doing some pro-social events quarterly where newly housed folks can all be invited to come. They had a barbecue, they had a holiday party, things like that to just kind of reconnect folks to community after they've been housed. And so, yeah, so those are just some examples. I'm happy to answer any questions. I feel like I just talked a lot, but happy to go into any more detail if it can be helpful.
Thanks, Kat. Questions, comments? Kenny?
Yeah, thanks, Kat. That's super helpful. And I guess a quick follow-up is, so the incident command, is that a name for this kind of approach, or it's a parallel thing?
Yeah, so incident command structure is actually a structure that comes from emergency response kind of world. And incidentally, that's where I also come from. So I was doing some incident response work at the health department prior to coming over to TPCH. So it's essentially a structure that's shared across agencies. So police use it, fire uses it, military uses it, emergency managers use it. And it's sort of a shared language and a shared framework so that when you're responding to a disaster, people know what different roles are, who's reporting to who, and it's a lot of, the idea is to lay out really clear communication. So that's kind of the Housing Central Command initiative was sort of developed to use this incident response framework within homelessness and to try and respond to homelessness as an emergency or as a disaster rather than just like as kind of however our system works. So the incident command system is sort of a framework that HCC was based on. So I don't know if that's helpful at all. I would say it's moderately successful in our community. I think it could be kind of bolstered, but that's sort of what that HCC was based on, is that framework. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, just super informative. And then a couple of other follow-ups, if I might. You mentioned it was grant funding. So is there a time period for that where this approach may wind down? And then I was also looking at, TPCH had sent out that strategic planning survey. And I was wondering, okay, is this HCC informing some of those goals? Are they to sustain, or what's the relationship between those?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, yes, this is grant funding and it goes through 2026. But from what we have seen, we're going to have another notice of funding opportunity within the next, could be in the next week. It may be in the next 3 months. We don't really know yet when it's going to drop from HUD. But in that funding, what we have seen in all the pre-documentation and discussion we've had with HUD is that we call it SNOFO funding, which is just special notice of opportunity. It's this unsheltered set aside funding has now been wrapped into our normal continuum of care funding that we are applying for every year. And so from what we can see, the funding that was kind of the special set aside funding will now be renewed each year through our normal competitive process. That could change, but that's the understanding that we have currently. So while this funding is supposed to end in 2026, but everything that we can tell now is that it will be renewed in 2026 as part of the NOFA process. So we should have sustained funding, at least for a 4th year, hopefully longer. And then, sorry, what was your other question? Oh, the strategic plan. Yes, I'm glad you saw the survey. It closes tonight at midnight, so go take the survey if you haven't yet. But yes, I would say there isn't we don't have direct goals and priorities that say do this with HCC. but a lot has been informed by HCC. Like one of our priorities this year is improving individual client experiences within the homeless response system. That has not been a focus in the past, but I think we've learned a lot about working with people experiencing homelessness through this encampment work, with some of the more acute clients, and just really wanting to meet folks where they are, really use trauma-informed approaches and rebuild some of that trust that can easily be lost by people having a lot of broken promises and things like that, as they're trying to get housed or as they're experiencing homelessness. So focusing on that individual client experience is something that's kind of new for our strategic plan, and things like that I think have been very much informed by the work we've done through HCC.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? I have a question, Kat. One of the things that we have talked a lot about, and it's in Keith Bentley's, it's his first recommendation, but this idea of no coordinated homeless prevention system. I mean,
Yes.
it obviously that is some of what's going on here, but this seems like it's much more like location based, right? Like you go somewhere to an encampment and that's where it happens. But is this something that like could be, I don't know if scaled up is the right word, or institutionalized so that it's what is starting to be the place where all things homeless services kind of come together, that kind of centralized system or whatever?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, because in our surveys that we have for strategic planning, we have two surveys. One is for the public, for anybody to take and give us our feedback. We've given that same survey to our TPCH members, committee members, board members, executives, etc. And so for our first priority, which is improving individual client experiences, the top two things, one is the top choice from the community is supporting the development of a centralized prevention system. I think the big reason for this, it was also listed in the top 5 for TPCH as well. It just wasn't number 1, but number 1, a big reason for this is because every year we're serving over 5,000 people in the homeless response system. However, there's over 7,000 unique households that are being assessed for supportive housing services every year, and we're able to serve about 29% of those people. So that means the other 70% of people are not able to be served by our system. We don't have capacity. And so the only way that we can turn down that inflow is by really investing in prevention. And what's happening currently is agencies across our community will receive little pots of money, whether that's P-CHIP funding or philanthropic dollars or something from ADOH or whatever that is, to do prevention funding. And so case managers are constantly, and this includes Cashew, I talked to them recently as well. I know somebody mentioned them, but their case managers are just constantly kind of running around town. Here's a list of agencies that have funding, call these people, or like trying to call them themselves and get clients some funding. And it takes tons of work, and all of these agencies are feeling the need for this funding, but also it's a big administrative burden. And so having one place where people can come to get assessed, see what they're eligible for, and receive that prevention funding instead of having to call every agency in town, I think would be super important, not only for the clients, but also really, really helpful for the case managers. And so we have programs like the EELS program for the county and our Cashew program here within the city, and some philanthropic funding that we know has come through some other agencies. But if there's a way to centralize the administration of that funding, then I think it could be a huge benefit for our community. And I think our community is seeing the need for that as well. The number one thing from TPCH folks was a 24/7 hub that co-locates housing services, health services, legal services, and behavioral health services so that people in crisis can receive all the services that they need. The challenge with both of these things is, yes, they're could really transform our community, but through our continuum of care funding, we don't receive funding that would be able to fund either of these things. And so it will take a lot of work with our jurisdictional partners and others to be able to build either of these systems. But I think it's a really important time right now with our homelessness crisis being what it is, that I think there's some willingness to participate and to create really innovative multi-sectoral solutions to this.
Do you think the central command thing that you were talking about has elements that could scale up into that, or have some needs there, or is this kind of something that wouldn't necessarily scale up like that?
I think in some ways, I think particularly another thing we've talked a lot about is shelter coordination, because right now shelters are just run by different agencies with braided funding, and they aren't really coordinated in like a system per se. And so we're trying to change that a little bit. Again, don't have funding for that, but it's something we're kind of working on. And so I think that the incident command structure could work for that sort of shelter coordination of like, here's an intake point, this is the person in charge, all these other agencies are reporting to this person what their capacity is, what their logistics are, and that person is kind of directing traffic and getting folks to where they need to be. So I think that a system like that could be possible to be scaled up for our shelter, which makes sense actually, because shelter is supposed to be for an emergency shelter. And so coordinating it like emergency response makes a lot of sense, I think.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments for Kat?
Well, thank you all. Happy to answer other questions if you want to reach out by email, or Rachel knows where to find me, so she can always forward me questions if there's anything else. Thanks,
Kat. Appreciate you being willing to hop on the hot seat with no notice. Appreciate that.
No problem.
Thanks for bringing that up, Kenny. Are there any other is there any other information that we feel like we need as a group to move forward with our work in terms of homelessness prevention? Obviously, we just checked a box real quick there, but if there's some other things that that we need, we can certainly try and get those things on the agenda and get the right people to come and talk to us. But if not, that is fine too. We can always revisit this. Okay. Seems like we're basically done with that agenda item. So let's see, where does that leave us? I think that gets us back to Jim for the Housing Trust Fund Task Force report out. You still there, Jim?
I am.
Take it away.
Okay, so we had two, I'd say, good meetings. The first meeting was basically to recap the three recommendations from the city that they asked us to analyze. And we kind of beaten them up at the first meeting, but at the end of the day, we said we really didn't understand what the options were. And so this last meeting, we had 4 different groups come in and present. There were a couple of people who did the call to the audience. The first person talked about a home repair program. They were hoping to get some funds. The William Marge Institute presented on the right to counsel. So Kat Davis presented to us on the eviction prevention and the emergency rental assistance program. Steve Arquist presented on the house program, which the house program was interesting. What they're basically trying to do is establish a pilot program with $100,000 that where the city would co-sign for renters who could not currently qualify for a rental. So it's people who are homeless, and the city would guarantee up to $2,500 per tenant. So the $100,000 would essentially fund up to about 40 individuals in the first year. The third program we listened to was the Threshold program, which essentially makes more effective use of housing vouchers. So they were hoping that that we could fund them up to $200,000 per year, which would fund about 1.5 individual full-time individuals for the administration of that program. So the Threshold program is basically a centralized landlord engagement program that would do a better job of identifying facilities that would take housing vouchers and then ensuring that they get used. We have I don't know if it's still the case, but I know a year ago, there were a lot of unused housing vouchers. The last presentation was a presentation on the tenant's right to counsel. And I thought that was very interesting. I learned a lot in that one, but really, it's not, I mean, there's a component of, if there's bad actors, if there's landlords who are taking advantage of tenants, the council could basically help them address it. But their basic point is that in the city of Tucson, we have roughly 12,000 evictions per year. And most of the people who are getting evicted don't understand what that means. They don't have counsel. They don't have anybody explaining to them the process, the rights, the impacts of what's happening, and trying to help them come to a more amicable solution that's not them going through the eviction process. So this last meeting, we basically listened to the presentations. I think our next meeting, we're going to get together and we're going to look at kind of the cost benefits of each of these items, try to determine where we feel like we get the best bang for the buck. And we'll be coming back to this group, I would assume, at the next meeting with a recommendation.
Go ahead, Ann.
I did just want to correct one comment, Jim, just because I don't like when misinformation gets out there. We don't use all the vouchers we have because we're fully exhausted in our budget for vouchers. And so we cannot issue vouchers at this time because of the budget. You can't go over budget. So while we technically have more vouchers to issue in the region, you can't do it. So just needed to correct that. And Threshold, yes, they work with vouchers, but they also work with other subsidized housing resources like rapid rehousing, etc. And so it's sort of any subsidized source. They try to help support landlords and get folks in. So just wanted to clarify that, as I don't want people being like, why aren't they issuing more vouchers?
Yeah, no, so I was taking notes like crazy, trying to make sure I captured it all.
Fair. Totally fair.
Thank you for that clarification.
Any questions, comments, et cetera, for Jim and the Housing Trust Fund Task Force? All right, thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Moving on to the next agenda item. We've been talking about this for a while and wanted to carve out a little bit of time on today's agenda to discuss Keith Bentley's presentation that he gave to the Equitable Housing Strategies Subcommittee. Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Sorry, just a question on the last presentation in that subcommittee. just around the process of, is the idea that the committee will be giving a recommendation of what to fund, or that the committee would be giving a recommendation of a category of something to fund and then be accepting applications, since the committee itself, right, isn't going to be implementing these programs? Like, how does that work?
I think the ask was for us to give a recommendation to mayor and council on the best use of those funds.
Okay, so
It would be a recommendation from CEHD that would be presented to mayor and council on how that money should be spent.
would there be an expectation then, or an openness to having groups be having an application process of how they would use that money? Or I guess is the envision, I had to leave early from the first two meetings, was at the first hour of each of them, but it wasn't fully clear on that part of the process. Of if there would, would be an application process, or if we're just making recommendations saying these are the groups that we want to fund.
I'm happy to jump in. So Jim's absolutely right that ultimately it is mayor and council that directs the use of that funding, but they've specifically asked the commission weigh in. But then yes, given it's city funding, we would have to say, here's the intent. Like, we want legal assistance to support renters. And then people would have to submit applications. We can't just give it to one group.
I said, and then for the next meeting, I know in the first meeting there was some talk, at least Kenny and I were bringing up ideas around like making space for like innovative projects. I think Jay, you were mentioning this too, or like seed funds for maybe something that isn't tried as much right now. I'm wondering if that will be part of the topic on a future meeting, or kind of what the next meeting agenda is. Or if these were the four categories that you're looking at.
So I'll tell you what, Ray, send Jay and I, if there's an agenda item you want to make sure we address, send us an email. We'll make sure we'll get it on the next meeting. Everybody needs to feel comfortable with this and be heard. So if there's something you want to talk about, let's get it on there.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Jay, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Any other comments or questions before we move on to the next agenda item? All right. As I mentioned, we wanted to give just a little bit of time to discuss Keith's presentation. Everybody's gotten links to the presentation, the full presentation, and also the slide deck. And just to kind of frame this a little bit, and the presentation is very heavy on data and kind of frames, kind of what's led us to the housing crisis and the homelessness crisis. And the basic outline of the presentation is why we need to improve our capacity for homelessness prevention. What do we know about the need and the volume of inflow into homelessness locally? What the current system looks like, which obviously is a lot of what we've been talking about. What do the experiences of people seeking homelessness look like? Again, we've talked about folks saying that they don't want housing, they want to remain homeless. Kind of what that looks like. What do we know about programs that are effectively preventing homelessness? And then what would better systems look like, and recommendations. So, that's the big picture, and the reason that I really wanted to make sure that we were giving this a little bit of time at least is because I think, Keith really provides a lot of the background information that is underlying both why homelessness has really increased, and what the kind of impediments are to really addressing it and getting those numbers down, and then the recommendations, as I mentioned, that are in his presentation, I think are at least in our subcommittee have found that they sound like pretty good recommendations. And, as we're talking about, our various, what we're doing in our subcommittees, it sounds like, a lot of those are kind of coming up organically in our conversations as well. So I don't know if y'all had time to look at this and if you had any questions or comments or anything in here that folks wanted to bring up or ask questions about. All right, if there are no questions or comments, we can certainly move on from this, but I want to give it another second and see if anybody has any thoughts. Go ahead, Kenny.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I guess I have one around like, one of the things our subcommittee kind of I thought we connected with was the need for housing navigators. And between, the services we kind of covered today, like, is there how many people are actually doing that currently, across either the different service providers or, is there even like a handful of people? Like, what's the size of this team? Just like the magnitude.
Anne or Kat or anybody on the call with the city, does anybody have any idea about how many navigators, if there are any, are operating in the city?
I can look it up and get that to you in a few minutes.
Yeah, there are multiple agencies across the community. Are you asking for specifically city employees or like at other agencies as well?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious, how we might quantify, right? Who's doing outreach or, how many points of contact. Because I think what got across for me was, it's a really tough system to navigate and know where things are. And so how many people are tackling that or have kind of a landscape view that can help, people that are just calling, right, to see what their options are.
Yeah, so within the city and the county, each agency has a couple, and then some of the housing or housing service providers, they may also have 1 to 2, but it's not everybody has specific navigators. Some of them, like the case managers, are the ones doing the navigating. But it's kind of evolved. So we have a couple navigators within the city, and they are supporting this batch matching effort I was talking about, as well as one from the county. And they've kind of taken on the role of working with the folks who are on the batch match. So they're prioritized for housing. There may not be a housing vacancy for them yet, but they're working on finding the people that are on the batch match and getting them document ready so that when a vacancy comes open, they are able to get housing right away. So that's kind of the role that they've taken on. But yeah, it's a very complicated system for sure. And so I think we can do 2 things. One is creating a better system that's easier to navigate. And one is, having more navigators and such to work with folks through the system. But I would say that there are maybe a dozen dedicated navigators in our community. I could be off, but we don't have super clear data because a lot of them are not with us. I apologize. I have to jump off, but I'm happy to answer any other questions via email. Thank you, guys.
Go ahead, Maggie.
Hi, so kind of as an agency that does not provide services to homeless, we still, because of our proximity to downtown, we get a lot of people coming in. We get a lot of people coming in from the housing center next door. And I know staff is a little frustrated as to where to refer people. So this is all great and good, but it would be nice to have a list of maybe the navigators. And as Kat just said, maybe we don't know that, but where do we refer people?
Thanks, Maggie. I did want to, Kat is correct in that the city used to only have a couple navigators. I will say over the past couple of years with our Housing First program, we have a lot of housing services agents who do outreach and help connect people. So I will say I would kind of double Kat's number because the city itself has about a dozen people providing support, even if people are currently housed, providing support, trying to keep them stable. So in terms of connecting people to resources, we have at least a few more than we used to.
So do we have a list, contact list, something that would help my staff?
I feel I can work with Kat on that. I feel like TPCH is the best organization to compile a list of all the different agencies that do housing navigation.
Is Kat with TPCH? I didn't catch where she was from.
So she is a City of Tucson employee who supports TPCH as her full-time role.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maggie. And, just to point out, the obvious here, I think, one of the things that, just keeps coming up is, the first recommendation on Keith's presentation. Jim mentioned it, it's coming up with his task force is that there's no coordinated homelessness prevention system in Tucson, Pima County. So if I were betting, I'd be willing to bet that might be at the top of our list in terms of recommendations, because I think it's a pretty obvious one. So that just keeps coming up over and over again. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, I appreciated so much the parts of the presentation where they show all the link doesn't work, and not at a fault of the people who are supporting people to navigate these programs, but that the funding is never close to meeting the need. I think we'll just also bring that up, even if we have more coordinated intake when the gap is so large. A lot of the programs, they're you have to call on Monday, or they stop taking calls after a certain day just because they can't keep up with it. You're spending all the time doing the intake when you're not going to have funding for all of that. Just to say, I wouldn't put all my eggs in the coordinated entry basket for that. Also because sometimes I think when things get larger too, sometimes the administrative burden is also larger. For some of the LIHEAP, trying to get LIHEAP funding, really difficult to do, and the requiring a social security card and a birth certificate for every person in the household, even if people are U.S. citizens, which I personally don't believe should be a barrier to receiving a lot of these assistance. A lot of people don't have that if people have been houseless and getting all that documentation. So yeah, I think this is some of my hesitation around a lot of focus on more centralized, more coordinated entry, as opposed to one having something where people can say we're out of funds this week. I would love that as someone who connects people to resources. To feel we actually still have money and we don't. Because I do think that energy of keep going around and around and around with phone calls does get exhausting, and sometimes just being honest and saying we don't actually have money can be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, I also agree with you, Ray, and I think that I think it is important to coordinate the services better, right? I mean, we want to be efficient with what we've got, but I think that there's this idea in the community that, and it kind of goes back to this idea that people want to be homeless, right? You ask people and half of them, a third of them, whatever, say, oh, I'd rather be on the streets. I don't want services or whatever. I just feel like that there's this idea that there are these resources available, and if only people were willing to accept them or were motivated, right, or whatever the case may be, they would be able to be off the streets. And I think that it's a really damaging narrative, because that's not the reality, right? If everybody that was on the street tomorrow stepped up and said, hey, I want to get off the streets and I want services, we know full well that more than half of them would not be able to receive services. At least that's what it sounds like. And I think it kind of drives this idea of, well, we might as well then, ban people from sleeping in washes or kick them out of parks and, all of these other ideas, because people think that, there are these resources and people should be availing themselves of them. So, maybe that's another thing that we can think about in terms of our recommendations of, like, even if everybody stepped up tomorrow, the resources aren't nearly what they need to be to deal with the situation. And I do think that really drives public opinion and leads to more punitive actions and things that really aren't very helpful to getting people off the streets and just the community at large. So that's something I would definitely like to discuss and see show up in some way in the recommendations that we have. Any other thoughts about the presentation, any of the recommendations, or any of the data or whatnot? All right, hearing none. Oh, I heard a hand pop. Go ahead, Mindy.
Actually, I was moving on to another thought. We've never discussed the responsibility of the state of Arizona funding more robustly programs. And actually, what I'm understanding is that the state is defunding more and more programs. And that's where we get people dropping out of programs. So I think that that's one angle that we've not really looked at, is the city is funded by the state as well, and that I feel the state has culpability here, and I don't know if if that conversation has ever happened, and if it hasn't, perhaps we can put that on an agenda.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And also, I think the same is true for the federal government, right? So much of the funding for this comes from the federal government as well. So, I think it's hard for, local jurisdictions to adequately address the problem with, not inadequate state funding, like you're saying, Mindy, or, from the federal level. So certainly something we can put on our list of things to address, potentially have a recommendation around.
I would love that.
Anything else, y'all, before we move on to discussing facilitation at our next meeting? I think maybe the next agenda item can hopefully kind of wrap some of this together and give us some momentum for our in-person meeting in September. So if there's nothing else, we can move on to that agenda item, but I don't want to move on too quickly if there's anything else. Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is check-in prior to Southwest Decision Resources facilitation. So, as you all probably remember, we do have some facilitation time left with Southwest Decision Resources. We don't have a ton of time left with them, but they will be able to help us at our next meeting, which will in September, which will be in person. So I just wanted to open this time up to, get some feedback about what ways we think that Southwest Decision Resources can best facilitate our conversation next month. Maybe what decisions we're hoping to get to, and some ways in which they can help us get there. So, my experience with working with them is, obviously, when they facilitated our in-person meeting and we decided as a group very quickly that we wanted to address homelessness. I don't know if y'all remember, but we had quite a bit of time that was set aside for a discussion about what we would want to address, and we very, very quickly came to homelessness. And so they were able to pivot very quickly based on, the fact that we made a quick decision. So I just say all that to kind of put out there that I think that, even if we maybe don't have a ton of specifics to give them guidance on, I think they'll still be able to help us. But I do want to open the floor up to see if y'all have some ideas about ways in which we would like for them to facilitate our meeting next month. I'll open the floor.
Jay, what would you prefer?
That's a good question, Jim. I mean, I do think it will be a good opportunity. Obviously, I think it'll be more productive for us to be in person. And I think, just kind of putting on the table what our at least draft recommendations are that we've gotten to so far. I mean, obviously, your subcommittee is, you basically have your draft recommendations ready to go, and I believe we will as well. So I think just, kind of putting those all on the table and having them help us work through and maybe rank, what we think is the most important. I mean, and maybe also, think about, do we want to limit the number of recommendations we have, or do we want to just, as big a list as possible? So maybe like kind of what we want our recommendations to look like in terms of, how many and what level of detail, and then, helping us, rank and or, choose which ones out of the ones we've drafted are worth keeping, and maybe which are worth, discarding. So I don't know. Those are kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah. So I think if we can get the recommendations from each group to them in advance so that they can maybe try to pull them together for us in a way and kind of help grow consensus on this group and what we want to do. I think it's a good use of our time and resources, but it would be easier for them if we have the recommendations to them in advance from all three groups. That's, I guess, my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Thanks, Joe. Go ahead, Kenny.
Yeah, I guess I'm also kind of curious, I think we definitely want to provide recommendations that, can be taken up quite immediately. But I kind of building off what Mindy said too, there are challenges or barriers at different levels of government too, that I feel like are worth mentioning or talking about too. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that's worth a little more deliberation again in this group of, okay, what are some of those things that we might identify? But it feels like an important part of the context because implicitly we're making choices about how to provide or not provide housing by not addressing, other issues that other possibilities that are out there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So what I think I hear you saying is, the idea of, there are some recommendations that seem like they could probably be implemented immediately. And then I don't know that you said this necessarily, but that also made me think, and then, maybe there are some longer term recommendations as well, but the barriers and the context that we're all working in to address this issue are important, and that we need to think about that and have that be part of the recommendation. So I think that's certainly something that we can, relay to them, relay to SDR before the meeting, so that, they can help us, I think come up with some questions and some prompts to get us to discuss the context and, what part of that context we think is and barriers are important to note. Any other thoughts about meeting with SDR next month?
Hey Jay, I did have a quick question. We do currently have the next meeting set for September 4th. that Monday is Labor Day on the 1st. I just wanted to do a temperature check with commissioners if folks are planning to be out of the office. If we did want to maybe reschedule, but totally up to the commission.
Right, thank you for that. That is important. So the meeting is scheduled, so say that the meeting is scheduled for
Thursday, September 4th.
Thursday, September 4th, and that's before the holiday. And then I guess if we were rescheduling, the idea would be to do it Thursday, the 11th, which I won't actually be here, so I would love to be there, but obviously Tisha can lead the meeting if necessary. So I don't know, what are your thoughts? What are folks' thoughts about meeting on the 4th? Are people going to be available or not? Manish, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Wanted to clarify that.
We can't hear you very well.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Labor Day's on the 1st this year, which is so strange, but I also had flagged it to Rachel because I personally can't come on the 4th, but that doesn't necessarily need to hold up the commission, since especially sounds like if you can't do then following Thursday. But
Oh yeah, I see on the 1st, right. Does anybody have a conflict with Thursday the 4th? Maybe we can just do a quick quorum check. Is anybody unavailable that they know of at this point?
I am not available.
I'm good.
I'm available on the 4th.
I'm available on the 4th.
Looks like at this point only one person, Maggie is the only person that I think is unavailable. Robert looks like he's available. So why don't we at this point, unless we start to hear that a lot of folks are unavailable, let's just keep it on the 4th and hope for the best.
Sounds good.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other thoughts about our facilitation with SDR on the 4th? We can move on, and obviously if folks have any ideas, you can shoot me an email or Rachel or whoever. So all right, hearing nothing else regarding facilitation, we can move into city and county updates, and up first is housing and community development.
Thanks, Jay. Couple updates that wanted to share. One, in terms of commissioners, I do believe from my understanding, the mayor and council, we have 2 vacant seats still. From my understanding, those 2 are moving forward to appointment. So hoping that you will get those seats filled relatively soon. There's now that Marianne has left, there is a vacant seat that I'll be working on filling. That's a nonprofit person who does development. So that is still a vacant seat. And then one Rachel brought up and did want to mention that at mayor and council yesterday, there was a short mention, and just wanted to let folks know the city is working on a pilot for a small safe parking site, outdoor site for homeless. We are working on it we're kind of taking backseat. There are some community partners really taking the lead on that. And so I know that there are folks kind of trying to come together and have it be a pilot to show that it could work in terms of a outdoor secure place where folks could tent with some facilities. And so as I mentioned, sort of the city is taking the back seat. I have some awareness of what's happening, but happy to share if folks want to reach out and want to try to get involved. Happy to share more on that. Appreciate Rachel sending out the document with more information. Happy to go into any of that. At mayor and council yesterday, they also approved framework for the single family homes that I've been talking about for years, which means part of that approval is we will start doing community engagement around the plan for single family homes. So now that we sort of have now that we have input from mayor and council, I do want to have engagement in the community in terms of best way for the city to go about selling some of those homes. Some of them we're converting into voucher units, but something that I think at a future meeting, I'm happy to do a presentation on and try to get feedback on. And then the other items that are on that list, happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Ann. Questions, comments, concerns? I would definitely love to have a presentation when the time is right about the what are we calling it? Sanctioned camping?
Sanctioned encampment, safe parking area. STAR, I don't know what STAR stands for, but that's what this is really sort of a mutual aid concept moving forward, but happy to, as I learn more, have someone present to you all.
Maybe that would make sense in October if there's enough, information and kind of momentum, since obviously we'll be meeting in person and dealing with SDR next month. So, but yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Ann.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? All right, next up is PDSD. Is anybody here from PDSD?
I'm not sure if anyone from PDSD is here.
Okay. Anybody from Pima County wanting to give an update?
Hi everyone, Cassie Lundeen with Pima County. Just wanted to share that our commission met on July 18th, where they recommended to split the 8.5 million that was dedicated by the Board of Supervisors as 5 million to the Build More category, which is issued annually in our RFP for affordable housing development. They also recommend to extend the categories to include new bridge/transitional housing development. So that is going to be on top of our new development, home ownership, rental, and preservation categories. And they also recommended to have the 3.5 million in the Keeping People Housed, which will afford existing programs to prolong their status in the community. So just speaking to a lot of what Kat Davis shared during the meeting, they're going to be able to continue that, especially during this time of uncertainty. Everybody, of course, is welcome to attend. All of our commission meetings are open to the public, and there's information on the agenda. I've also shared with Rachel so she can send that afterwards. We continue to develop our regional funding plan, and Nicole Fife from County Administration is here to share updates for that. Nicole?
Hi, everyone. I also just wanted to address, I think it was Jim Topol's question about the source of funds and uses of funds for the approximately 250 million over 10 years that the Board of Supervisors adopted a couple of months ago. And so that doesn't start until next fiscal year. So the funding that Cassie was just talking about was just a general appropriation for this current fiscal year, but starting next fiscal year, it's going to be a combination of property taxes, or other fund sources. So it could be a property tax increase of 3 cents a year, or it could be other fund sources that are used to come up with 250 million over 10 years. So each year, the county administrator, working with our finance department, our board will make a recommendation to the board for the annual budget, and then after 10 years, that will have had to sum up to 250 million. And our finance department is working on some cash flow scenarios for us that they should have in September as to whether we can expect to sort of have a straight 25 million across the board for 10 years, funding source, or whether it would start off small and get larger over time. And they're going to provide a few different options. The uses, though, will be guided by the regional housing strategy and funding plan that we're going through right now. So Echo Northwest is wrapping up their housing study. In fact, they sent us the final draft today, so that should be out soon. And so that's the housing needs assessment for the whole region, including the cities and towns, as well as the target market analysis and so on. So now that they're finished with that, we then move on. They'll be helping us with the strategy side of things. And so that's where we would really appreciate some participation from this group and definitely, City of Tucson staff and so on, because we know for sure that the majority of funding will be spent in the City of Tucson. And so, we definitely would like participation. And so we should have, I think in the next couple weeks, Cassie with Echo Northwest, like a schedule for how we get there. I kind of picture it like the HAS plan, but with a funding plan accompanying it and measurable targets, and covering the region, and not just the City of Tucson, but and then also calling out different lanes, right? So the county may have different lanes than the city, than the town of Marana, and so on. But very much looking forward to going through that process.
Thanks, Cassie and Nicole. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Kenny.
Yeah, thanks for the update. I was interested in attending the last meeting. I was wondering if they were recorded, like these are, if those are available to view afterwards.
Yes, they are, and I'm more than happy to share that recording with Rachel to share with the group.
Thank you.
Anything else, Sean, before we move on? All right. Thank you, Nicole and Cassie, and thank you, HCD staff as well. Appreciate it. And with that, we will discuss some next steps and wrap up our meeting for today. So the next steps, obviously, we are going to have an in-person meeting with Southwest Decision Resources, and it will be at Primavera, where we've had it before, their site down off of South 6th, right near the big food city down there. And that will be from 4 to 6 on September 4th, as we talked about. So looking forward to that. Our upcoming subcommittee meetings and working groups, Equitable Housing Strategies, I believe we will be rescheduling that. So stay tuned for a new time and date. Affordable Housing, Wednesday, August 20th from 4 to 6. The Mobile Home Working Group, Thursday, August 28th from 1 to 3. And then Housing First, Tuesday, August 26th from 4 to 5:30. Let's see, what else? Next Pima County Housing Commission meeting, Friday, August 15th at 8:30 a.m. And that's really all I've got. Is there anything else? Go ahead, Rachel.
Hey, Jace. I think we need to correct the next Pima County Housing Commission date. I think I had it incorrect in there. I think, or it was rescheduled to August 19th at 1:30. If someone at Pima County wants to confirm that, well, I look for it in my email.
You are correct.
Thank you.
And it'll be all virtual that day.
And I can be sure, I'll send out a big email to all the commissioners with all these updates and things.
That would be much appreciated. Thank you, Rachel. Anything else regarding next steps? Any questions? Any thoughts? If not, we're so close to adjournment. All right, y'all. If there is nothing else, thank you for your time today, and look forward to seeing everybody in person next month. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thanks, Jay.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you, Jay.
Bye.
Thank you.